Too often business owners today are focusing on the little things in business. They're ordering supplies, dealing with employees, and dealing with customers, when what we should be focusing on is the most important thing, cash flow. I've grown over 10 businesses from the ground up. In this podcast, you'll learn the ins and outs of building a business and how to build transferable value. And most importantly, you'll learn how to maximize cash. They call me Cash Flow Mike, and this is the clear path to cash. Hey, it's Cash Flow Mike, and welcome to the Clear Path to Cash podcast. And I tell you what, today we're going to talk about something that is really important to me. It's really exciting for you. We're talking about raising money in your company, and I am joined with the man that can help you do it, David Safir of David Safir International. He is the king of raising money. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, I really appreciate it, Cash Flow Mike. I love your name. I love your show. Love your book. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, I'll tell you what, it's so important, right? And one of the things you said to me just before we got on air was money is on sale right now. And that's exactly what I want to talk about, because you know how to get it. You know how to position others how to get it. And I want to make sure that they know, that it's out there, for one, and two, that it's available, right? It's available, and it's up to you to get it. And you're the guy that can help position it. So, before we get going, I want to remind people that we are on YouTube, we're on Apple, Google. I mean, you name it. If you just Google a podcast somewhere, the Clear Path to Cash is on the directory. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you're involved, get notified for new episodes, and because you're going to get good stuff like we're getting right now from David. So, David, kind of introduce your background. Kind of, let us know what's happening.
Well, thanks. My background is I'm a business person, just like most of the people who are listening to you. I come from a big corporate background, but I've now working with small companies, and I've owned small companies myself. And I'm not a finance guy. I'm not a marketing guy. I'm not a sales guy. I'm not an operations guy. I put everything together, even though right now we're talking about capital. And that's our focus for today. And I love understanding how it's going to impact all the different types of the business. And if we have time, maybe we can talk about why somebody might want to raise capital, even if they're doing well.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's kind of talk about that, right? When we're talking about raising capital, I mean, you always think of like that startup guy, right? The one that has to go with the 3 F's, the friends, the family, and the fools. but let's talk about it in life cycle. Because we'll break it down into 3, maybe 4 categories of that startup, kind of that growth company that's starting to see some success, maybe a more mature company, and then maybe one that might be in trouble. So, let's start with the startup company. Where does somebody that's going to start a company get money?
The first things that a lot of people think about, because it's highly publicized, is going out and raising capital from a venture fund, right? Mm-hmm. You hear about all these stories, I want one of those. I want to raise money from a venture fund. But so few companies get funded that way. Right. And so I'm going to suggest first place you could look is friends and family. You've got to be careful when you're doing that, because there's a lot of pitfalls. And yes, you should be getting lawyers involved to protect yourself, not just and them. It's a two-way street. But that's a good place to start with people you already know that have confidence in you. But I'd love to also mention something that's fairly new. That's crowdsourcing. Now, and you don't have to do it through a legal device of borrowing or having a capital infusion. If you're selling a hard good or even a service, you can pre-sell your product and service. Yep. Which there's platforms. I always forget their names once I got onto a podcast. I'm guessing you're remembering at least one.
Yeah, Kickstarter, right? Everybody knows Kickstarter. And Now, David, have you ever used it? Have you ever done it?
No, I've Kickstarter. No, but there's another one that it's pink. And yes, I have. And it was for a nonprofit organization. Okay. And it was for a choral organization that has like 400 or 500 members and 7 different choirs, and they needed to raise about $15,000. And I actually set it up for them and worked through it, and it worked like a charm. Yeah. And it's great to get started.
And believe it or not, I did invest in one. And I'll tell you the end of the story first. I lost money, but
Well, but let me ask you first, did you invest? Because that's a different thing
well,
than pre-buying, because you can still lose your
it's
money when you
pre-buy. It
pre-buy.
was a pre-buy, right?
Okay.
To
Yeah.
them, it's a raise, right? To them, it's a capital raise,
Yeah.
brought money in advance. And it was called the Magic Instruments guitar or whatever. And it was a self-teaching guitar. I mean, it was a fantastic idea, and they wanted to raise
Right.
like $50,000 or $60,000, and they ended up raising almost 500,000 just in pre-sales, and could never get the product out into the market,
You
right? So
couldn't
this
get
is
it out.
4 years
Yeah.
later, just can't get it out, can't make it work, right? There was too
Yeah.
many flaws in the logic, I guess, but it was a pre-sale. But when I look back at it, well, I lost money, right? Because now I have no money and no product.
Right. You pre-purchase a product that was never delivered to you. And the reason I'm making that point is there's a different recourse when somebody doesn't deliver a product than when they take your money for an investment. And
That's right.
so as a business owner, the people listening to us are mostly business owners. There's a much lower risk. If for some reason they can't deliver on the product, it's more a reputational risk. It's more of a, that's more the risk, as opposed to people coming back to you and suing you for not delivering your $10, $20, even a $500 product because of the way the terms and conditions are set up on those websites.
That's right. That's right. I actually like crowdsourcing for that purpose. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
an idea they were trying to just really get market validation. And
Yeah.
what we're talking about, David, is equity financing. Now, then the other side of the coin is the debt financing. But most startups, the only probably debt that I think that you can get is maybe a home equity line or something like that, unless you have some other type of relationship. I'm talking about just starting your company to get cash from. What do you think? Is there some other programs out there?
Well, there are. The number one way people raise capital for their startup companies is called credit card debt.
That's right.
And I learned this 30 plus years ago, and I was floored.
Mhm.
But it's still today. And fortunately and unfortunately, credit card lines are easy to obtain.
Mhm.
The problem is it's hard to get out of the debt.
That's
And
right.
so if you don't have a real clear path for getting out of it, don't get into it. But let's talk about other options. You're right, home equity lines. But this in the United States and in a lot of other countries, there's government institutions that provide assurance to the banks to get loans. And in the United States, it's a Small Business Administration loan.
Mhm.
And they're actually fairly good. And they're fairly low interest. And the banks like them because the federal government takes on 80% of the risk. You still need good credit, and you need to sign away. If you've got a house, you sign away on assets that you owned
Mhm.
in most cases in order to get that loan.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're betting on you, right? That's basically what you're doing. Is that I'm betting that my idea is
Yeah.
a good one, and I'll be
Yes,
able to service the debt. So
absolutely.
there's different ways, and believe it or not, I've actually used both ways. I mean, I've raised money like we did with Simplex Financials. I've used credit card debt. I've used home equity lines. I've used my savings, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, much like everyone else that starts a business does. Now, here it's a cool transition. You notice we didn't say venture capitalists. We didn't say private equity firms, or anything like
Right.
that, right? In startups, but there's a point in time when you feel that the market is starting to take off. Really, instead of you pushing your message out, people are starting to pull your message from you. Like, I want what you're saying, right? There's a feeling that you get. That puts you in a position when you want to raise more money to, finance growth or otherwise. You've got some different options. Now, what are those?
Well, I'm going to go back to borrowing first.
Okay.
So that you and I both know there's pros and cons to everything, right?
Mhm.
If you borrow money, the risk is you've got to pay it back, and you can't, and the lender can come after you for
That's right.
assets, etc. But I'm going to go back there first because one of the easiest things to borrow against is real estate. And so if you're a company who's reached the size that you've got employees that are centrally located and you're renting space, going from a rental to a owned building can actually reduce your costs significantly.
Mhm.
It can increase some risk, but there's lots of questions you have to ask yourself. But you can get embedded in a loan that brings you cash into the company, if you're also buying a building, you can actually get better terms and conditions for borrowing and actually lower your cash outlay because you're paying a mortgage. That's a fixed cost forever instead of paying rent that is probably higher than you're going to pay as a mortgage, and it's going to go up and up and up and up over time.
Right. Yeah, you've got an asset you can appreciate, and then later, if you need cash, you've got something that you can sell, right? I mean,
right. Sell it or pull equity out of it or refinance the loan. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, usually when I'm talking to people about debt financing, I always ask them a couple of questions. I think it depends on how much control of your company you want, right? Because when you start talking about equity, you lose just a little bit of your control. You lose a little bit of the ownership of the company. Loans typically happen faster, believe it or not. So if you need money faster, sometimes the loan application is faster than going on a road show and pitching to 40 different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And again, I think those are the two big things, is about control and timing and the amount of money. Sometimes if you need a smaller amount of money, it's easier to get a loan than the other way around, right? It's harder to raise a small amount of money. They want to put in larger amounts for investing.
Oh yeah, and if what you're looking for is a large amount of liquid capital, just $2 million cash to spend as you feel is fit, that's a harder sell to a bank, especially if it's disproportionate to your revenue stream, your income stream, etc. Right. So that's absolutely true. On the other hand, I think sometimes people don't understand when you take on business partners through an equity raise that there's more restrictions on you than you think.
That's right.
All right. So day to day, if you still own the majority shares, they really can't complain too much. But there's this overarching thing that says the people running the company are responsible for the best interests of the shareholders. And so even the day to day, if you're not doing what's in the best interest of the shareholders, you can end up in trouble if at some point you don't perform and there's consequences.
Right. And I've got a story for that, but I'm going to remind people that this podcast is going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on Apple. It's Google. It's anything, not just this one, but all of them. But we are talking with David Saphir. He is David Saphir International, and he can help you get money. So let me tell you about my experience here with raising money. We just did this year during COVID, actually. And believe it or not, it was probably because of the group of friends or maybe the market conditions. We raised a considerable amount of money in about 16 days.
Wow, that's great.
We did 26 pitches in 16 days. We couldn't travel, so we could do more pitches, right? So it wasn't a road show where I went in and sat down at somebody's table and actually, pitched to them. We just did Zoom calls because of COVID restrictions. And 24 of the 26 said yes. Right, 24 out of 26. I mean, because
that's huge. That's abnormal.
Totally abnormal.
I'm telling people that so they're not going to have an expectation if they go do this, they're going to hit 26 out of 28.
I think it was the people that knew us, right? It was a friends and family round, which is generally a little bit faster. It was the idea, and it was the market conditions where people were feeling unsafe in the market, so they chose to take money out of the actual stock market and invest in an idea. It was a perfect storm to raise money, and I don't think I've ever seen it in 20 plus years of running businesses, and I don't think I'll ever see it again, right? Wow. But it was just that one thing. But when you say restrictions, let me tell you, here's some of the restrictions that we have. There are percentage votes on almost everything. If we want to sell the company, if we want to take on debt, if we want to buy assets, if I want to, just have an expense over a certain amount, all of those things take a certain amount of shareholder buy-in, which means you vote that I can make that decision. So there is some loss of control, and maybe you can speak to that. What are some typical things you can expect?
Well, it's interesting. I've actually raised capital through debt instruments for the company. So we didn't have the same type, but it's a similar situation where we had a fiduciary responsibility to the debt holders to do what was in their best interest and not just do whatever we wanted to. And so it's things like you hear about people raising capital, and then the whole company goes on vacation to the Caribbean for a week.
That's a good way to get in jail.
Well, if you don't fail and you make tons of money for the investors,
That's
yeah.
right.
But
Nobody asks the
think
question.
of the message it sends. We just raised, thank you very much for your money. We're going on vacation. See you in a week.
That's right.
So in this, you are not working generally. Now, if you've got a sales force that had preconditions and they earn their way to a trip, that's a whole different thing. That's normal and customary within the business world to have that type of reward, but not just because we have more money in the bank. It's the same thing with paying salaries, right? I don't know what your restrictions are for you determining officer compensation or share, compensation for having not working for working in the company that you get compensated. You can't have an excessive salary because, again, if something goes wrong, and you hear it all the time in the publicly discussed problems out there, is like, oh yeah, they had 3 homes, they had 2 expensive luxury cars, and they go on these luxury vacations, and that just sets you up for failure. Well, that, and you're sucking the cash out of your business, which is the whole thing you want in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I tell you, all those decisions, executive compensation, all take board approval. Now, with you though, on the debt instruments, and maybe you got some experience here, they can put covenants, on the way you run your business, which means you have to have a minimum current ratio, or meaning that they're going to look at you a different way. They're going to manage the company through financial performance.
They could, but we didn't do bank debt financing. We did a private offering.
Oh, okay.
So it was a Reg 506D offering. So in that case, we put out the terms and conditions.
Got it.
And all the warnings, et cetera, that you would, if you're doing equity. Either way, you're putting it out there of what you're spending your money on, what's the intention of the money, and putting restrictions around yourself to be able to raise the capital.
Okay. So what's the best thing to go to right now? I mean, if you were just like, what's the hot thing? Where's the money at?
So in my opinion, and I know you said you raised you raised the money in 16 days, but I'm guessing it took you probably months to prepare for the raise.
We actually prepared for the raise in about 6 weeks.
Okay, so a month and a half.
But to close the round, though, which means actually collect all the money after you get commitments and all that type of stuff, it took another 3-4 months after that to collect all the money and get all the signatures and everything that we needed.
So start to finish, that might have been 5 to 6 months?
That's right.
Okay. So that's relatively fast, actually, especially the upfront part. It can take a long time, but you've done it before. I'm guessing that's part of the reason that it went faster.
That's right. And well, we got great help too, right? I mean, we've actually hired a professional to put it all together. And then my partner, Rob Chandler, has got a lot of experience doing that. So he managed the process as well.
So again, setting expectation for somebody who's doing this. I've only done it once. I was responsible for it. We hired attorneys, but not anybody to really help us manage the process. So it probably took 2 or 3 months just to create documents.
Yeah.
So we could start going out. Anyhow, as far as I'm concerned, today, money is on sale from commercial lenders.
Commercial lenders, got it.
Commercial lenders. Now, notice I didn't say banks. Banks are the number one place people go when they need to borrow money because they're on the corner. But there's a whole nother layer of financing available to people from commercial lenders that don't have a retail front, but probably provide as much or more capital to the business marketplace than the retail banks.
Got it.
And so I would highly suggest that is a place to go if you need more capital, or if you currently have capital and you've borrowed it more than about a year or 2 ago, because money went on sale and the interest rates are as low as they've been since, I don't know. I haven't researched it, but we're talking about apartment loans for 2.99% for apartment buildings.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
crazy.
it's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That's not typical, but I know somebody who did one, and his typical rate is somewhere between 4 and 6 for commercial buildings, which, as far as I'm concerned, is still crazy.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that and you look at your cash flow, and you look at, so if you've got a current loan, it's very easy to do a return on investment analysis from a cash perspective. And it's usually sub 2 years. The ones I've looked at, it's less than 2 years when you look at the cost of financing, et cetera, to get your money back.
Right.
And in the meantime, you've got all this excess additional cash flow.
Right.
And then if you don't have a loan, but you want to buy new equipment, or you've got bad debt, i.e. credit card debt, or other types of debt. The reason you get into it is you don't have good credit, and you won't be able to get a good loan unless you've got good credit. But or if you've got equipment that you want to finance to release some of that capital, you got a $500,000 piece of equipment that's free and clear, you might want to take a loan out against it to raise additional capital to do other things to grow your company.
Right.
There's all sorts of reasons to go get money that's on sale right now.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what, I want them to call you. I want them to go to your website. I want them to call you. I want them to email you. I want people that if you need money right now, I want you to go to David Safir. So as we close, I always ask somebody a question. This is your bit of wisdom, your little bit of nugget. If your best friend came to you today and wanted your advice on starting a business, what would you tell him?
I'd say plan, but don't take too much time and expect that the plan will change constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it? Patton? Planning is
Plan.
everything.
Planning.
Planning.
Right. Just do a business plan. People don't want to really put something together, but do a forecast on how much money you think you're going to earn. What's the amount of money you need to invest to get to that point? A good cash flow spreadsheet or software that provides that for you, that gives you a peek into the future. That's going to be critical, but nothing ever goes as planned.
Right.
I had a professor who said, once you're done with your business plan, cut the revenue in half, double the expenses, and if you can still make money, that's probably a good business.
That's right. That's a good one. I'm going to write that one down, as a matter of fact. So
okay.
David Safir, everyone. And you have been listening to the Clear Path to Cash. Thank you, David, for coming on. And my hope is, where should we go? How do we contact you?
It's davidsafir.com. So DAVIDSAFEER.com. And that's where I am.
DavidSafir.com. I'm Cashflow Mike, and you've been listening to the Clear Path to Cash podcast. And as always, don't be a dumb business owner.